Good evening and welcome to another exciting episode, I should say, of Triple Tap Tuesday. Always exciting to be here. So welcome Kent, welcome Lance. Where have you disappeared to, Kent? We can't see you. So welcome Kent, welcome Lance. How are you both this evening?
Awesome, Ainsley. Awesome.
Have you had a good week?
Oh, I've had a fantastic week. Kent looks like he's frozen, so he should come back in. I'll give you some exciting news. We've probably heard in the news lately, there's a whole heap of Aboriginal artefacts and skeletons that are being returned from all over the globe to Australia at the moment.
Yeah.
All the stuff in northern New South Wales has been presented to the Githable for them to deal with. And so that's hot off the press. So that tells you exactly who the true tribe are for northern New South Wales. Bundjalung tried to claim it, didn't get it. Non-Minjimble, Githable.
Wow, that's super fantastic. We seem to have lost Kent. Let's just see if he's attempting to get back in. We may have lost him. But nonetheless, we will carry on. I know it's been an absolute wet weather over here in the west. Thankfully, I've finished the bulk of all my paving that I was doing, so I've had a few busy days. But we have managed, some of our listeners will be pleased to know, we've managed to get some of the backlog of the Triple Tap interviews up and on the YouTube channel and the website. We've got everything up to number 44, and very exciting tonight, we're up to number 49. So we've nearly done a full year's worth of Triple Tap shows. So guys, if you've been excited about joining our, being part of our Triple Tap shows, do show us some love in the chat. We're monitoring the chat tonight. Give us some thumbs up or some love or some emojis, because we love your interaction. We love your questions. We've got a really exciting person that we're going to be interviewing this evening. I always love reading these bios because the people that we've interviewed, the 49 odd people that we've interviewed, some of their bios have just been absolutely incredible. You'd have to agree, Lance, wouldn't you?
Incredible.
And I look at some of these and I go, wow, you know, what have I done in my short lifetime compared to some of these people that have just done so much? It just blows me away. So I will carry on. I'm not sure. We'll just have to watch out for Kent coming back in. Hopefully he's able to rejoin us. Otherwise, we'll just carry on as normal. So tonight, the gentleman that we're going to be interviewing, his name is Dr. Charles Blake. And with a background in creative materials technology, marine operations, engineering and agriculture, combined with 24 years experience in environmental consulting and the provision of waste management solutions, Charles has cultivated a penetrating understanding of natural and mechanical systems, which he applies to environmental technologies and the delivery of cost-effective results. Charles has an acute ability to identify interfacing technologies that enable specific outcomes. He has provided consulting, waste management plans, and the implementation of environmental solutions to many of Australia's largest companies. Additionally, Charles has an extraordinary wide network of technology providers, innovators, prototypers, and solution providers drawn from an extensive international network. This has given rise to projects in Canada, USA, South America, Holland, Germany, New Zealand, Australia, and the islands of the Southwest Pacific. So already just in that little lot alone is just so much information. Charles uses his understanding of natural symmetries, patterns, and systems to inform and identify specific outcomes, and identifies financially viable and technically achievable technological pathways of the delivery of those outcomes. Charles is articulate in his ability to communicate ideas in both general and technical terms. And as such, Charles was granted adjunct status at the University of Queensland while working on a photocatalyst of water to hydrogen project, and worked with Professor Max Liu to successfully apply for a 1.8 million ARC linkage grant. He served on the Industry Advisory Board at Griffin University School of Biomolecular and Physical Sciences, has had association with QUT in regard to technology evaluation, solar peripheral technologies, and he has been in liaison with the CSIRO regarding supercritical water gasification and oxidation of aqueous waste streams, including sewage sludge. Charles was awarded on the 22nd of October 2013 an honorary doctorate of philosophy in physical sciences, environmental engineering, facilitated by the Bircham International University in New Zealand from the International University of Fundamental Studies, Oxford Educational Network, California University. Charles is collaborating with Trevor Osborne's World Harmony, is on the advisory board of Kathleen Smith's The Colorado Center and the Intention One Earth Foundation, as well as working as co-founder of the Universal Trust. Charles is also a member of the Oceanic Transition Foundation established in Papua New Guinea. Well, ladies and gentlemen, after that incredible bio, please give a round of applause and welcome Dr. Charles Blake to the call. Dr. Charles, if you're there, turn your camera on. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so very much.
What an incredible bio.
I feel ancient. Just hear it all come back. It's been very interesting life so far, I have to say.
Yeah, and so what are you doing now? I believe also tonight we'll be talking with you about some incredible education stuff that you're working on, and I'm very, very intrigued to learn more about that. I've heard little snippets, a little birdie told me, so we would love you to share that with our listeners tonight. But tell us, what have you been working on?
Well, the history of this actually goes back to my educational experience, which was kind of interesting. But I'm dyslexic, as many creative people are, and I was put into boarding school at the age of 10 through to 18, and that was quite a challenging experience. But I was very lucky to go to a very good school in Victoria, very cold. But nonetheless, I found it sufficiently confronting to have given rise to a lifetime interest in the whole process of education. And what's become very clear to me is that it's really not about telling people what we think they ought to know, so much as it is equipping them with the skills to very powerfully get to learn what it is that their passion has them guided to come to understand in the course of their life. And so we shouldn't focus necessarily on just degrees, but on specific skills, a number of which I've sort of had the privilege of evaluating over the years. So we kind of break things down into a number of sections. I guess first and foremost is data acquisition. And that's to do with reading. And back in the early 60s, a lady called Evelyn Wood was studying people like no less than John F. Kennedy. And John F. Kennedy had the ability to read a novel a day, all the newspapers, all the legislation he had to go through. He literally could read as fast as he could see. And so she wanted to know, how is it that some people can do this and some people can't? And she discovered that this was to do with eye patterns, eye movement patterns, and so on and so forth. And the way we teach reading at the moment is certainly suboptimal. She was followed by a fellow called Richard Welsh, who came up with a process called photo reading. And they have been able to teach people how to read literally as fast as they can see. And that implies also a higher level of cognizance and understanding. And it's all in all, it's far more efficacious because people get exhausted reading if they don't read properly. So that's one skill. So there's other skills to do with mastering mathematics. And again, you know, we tend to take the approach that we take people to school, we sit them down, we tell them to shut up, and they're supposed to just take on what it is that we tell them that we think is what they need to know so that they can pass an exam, and that's all quality control, blah, blah. At the end of the day, they're being prepared to do a cog-like job in a big machine called industry. And I think that is a primary underestimate of human potential. And I just think it falls way short of what we should be doing. Does that make any kind of sense?
Yeah, I definitely love the idea of being able to read a lot faster, because I absolutely love reading, and I understand what you're saying. Like, I read like almost a word for word, whereas I know some people like skim read and they still get the gist of it, but I like to read like every sort of word, so I really get it. But to be able to read faster and read more books would be absolutely amazing.
Well, I think it's a really important skill. So there's that. There are skills that we don't teach, like concentration, contemplation, and meditation, which are really to do with brain state. But it's been quite well established that physiologically the brain alters if we engage in regular meditation for the better. It alters for the better. So there's data acquisition. And then there are other skills that we've all got, but no one even talks about for the most part. And these are more metaphysical skills. Things, for instance, like trans-species communication, communicating with other organisms. We know that this is something that happens at an empirical level. Some very seminal work was done by a fellow called Cleve Baxter, who worked for the New York Police Department, and his job was to maintain the lie detector equipment, and he used to take them home sometimes, and it crossed his mind one day to hitch one of these things up to a plant, which he did. And then he thought, well, how am I going to get a stimuli out of this plant? Maybe I should put a match under the leaf. And the plant already started responding to that. So he thought, well, perhaps that's just coincidental. Maybe I'll get the matches out and do the job. And he got another response. To cut a long story short, he wrote a book about this level of fundamental communication between all living cells. And back in our history, there was a fellow called Rene Descartes who basically was told by the Catholic Church that if he encroached on their territory, which was basically the world of spirit, that they'd burn him at the stake. So he was told he had to recant his thoughts on matters and declared that living animals were just automata. They had no soul. You could treat them however you like. They don't have any feelings. And the impact of that on Western civilization and the level of callous behavior that we express with animals, let's stand plants, is breathtaking. And that needs all to be wound back. So trans-species communication is immensely important. If we can learn to do that, and there are people that teach the subject, then we're basically sharing knowledge with the rest of the denizens of our planet. So you can see already, when we say education, we're talking about a very different latitude of endeavour than sitting on your blot in a university or in a school. Yeah. So trans-species communication's one. Obviously, mental telepathy is involved in that. And another one is remote viewing. Remote viewing is conducted by pretty much all the militaries in the world to access information. And they do that through various practices. But this is not nonsense stuff. This is very serious stuff. But I take the view that if a party can master a handful of these skills, then it's unlikely that any information in the entire cosmos can be denied them. And that's a pretty good place to come from if you are filled with a passion for being the steward of one of the stewards of planet Earth, and lovers of humanity.
Yeah.
So then, of course, those skills are fairly esoteric and specialist, but then the rest, if you can master learning to read at the speed that we discussed and learning aspects of your mind, how to control, contemplate, concentrate, etc., then you can process the data that you're taking in. But there is one more step that I think is really fascinating that we've learned about, but we haven't seen too much by way of connection, because what we have in mind here is this is a phenomena called transcranial stimulation. And that's where specific parts of the brain are stimulated using electromagnetic pulses. And that induces a savant-like capability for about an hour, which is pretty exciting in itself. And there are different parts of the brain that can be stimulated. They can be spatial, they can be artistic, they can be musical, they can be emotional intelligence, etc. And they recently discovered a specific area for mathematics, referred to as, I understand, as Area 44. And I think to put it in pictorial terms, when we grow up and we go to school and we come out and we really do have a seriously constrained view of who we actually are and what our general capabilities are, which is, I think, it's served civilization in its attempts to suppress and to control and to coerce us into a particular model. But imagine if you thought you were, growing up in a 2-bedroom unit and it transpired that actually you were living in a palace with solariums, laboratories and ballrooms and libraries and the whole gamut of what's capable, what our brains, our internal geography has available to us. So if, for instance, now we consider accessing this process, this transcranial stimulation, and then coupling that with neural feedback training that we use for learning how to control our breathing and our pulse rate and various other things, and that is done with a degree of efficacy. If we were to be able to use that technology to enable us to, at will, navigate to these different domains of our internal geography, that would open up a whole new level of human endeavor. And I find that a very, very exciting prospect, because we are not going to solve the problems of this planet with the thinking that created those problems. We have to step up as stewards of the planet, and we need to really fully exercise our capabilities as humans. We are referred to very derisively by certain parties as useless eaters, which is particularly offensive since it was those parties that destroyed our education system.
Yeah. Charles, can I just ask, one of our listeners has said, have you got any recommendations for any books to study these sort of enhanced learnings, or do you yourself conduct any workshops or trainings in these areas?
Not recently. We did start a project which was St. Sophia's College, because I did a training program in neuro-linguistic programming, and a process called generative learning, which is very, very useful. And I did mention in our final class, which was taught by Marvin Oka and Philippa Bond, that this technology was fine because it was middle management that was there doing it. And this is many decades ago now, 3 decades at least, and it was $3,000 a head at the time, which was a small amount of money. And I stood up, I said, look, this is fabulous for us, but it really belongs in schools. And the barrister, Mike Battle, from Toowoomba, and he said there is a nunnery in Warwick, St. Sophia's Nunnery. If someone is prepared to dedicate themselves to being the principal of the school there, then I will acquire that and we'll turn it into a college. And another fellow stood up, Professor Garnet Alexander. He was a teacher at the time, a deputy headmaster. And he said, well, look, I'll resign tomorrow if this opportunity is real. And literally within 2 weeks, that opportunity was fleshed out, a budget was drawn up. Mike Battle very graciously acquired the college. It's in Warwick, it's still there. And for 5 years, we taught accelerated learning primarily to students that were not performing well enough to get into university but wanted to. But the result of doing that was that they could do their university degrees in sort of 12 to 18 months instead of the usual 3 to 6 years.
So you had some great results in that area then. They really took to that.
Well, we did have fabulous results, but then after 5 years, effectively, our students were blackballed and we were blocked.
Why?
And because the drivers that drive our education system are not so much about the rate at which we impart knowledge and understanding. It's the rate at which we can get money out of the government and our students and how long we can drag that on for. And that's a horrible situation. So that school was shut down. And for us to set up another school, we would do it rather differently this time. And we would do it in a way, in association with an international university, so that we would issue our own qualifications. And we wouldn't orient ourselves to existing education departments because I just, it's way below standard as far as I'm concerned. And it's set up for a totally different purpose. Our purpose is to empower humanity.
Yeah. And is that something that you're now looking at getting set up? Is that something that you'd like to do, get the funding and get that set up?
It certainly is. We are looking to acquire a property down towards Casino Way, where we want to establish prototype activities to iron out and interface all of these different things and to determine what we can't use and whose work, because we'll probably need to enter into licensing. For instance, there is a woman in the United Kingdom who is an epileptic, and when she has very severe epileptic episodes, she has out-of-body experiences, and from that perspective, she can actually see how the mind works, and she's been able to come back and apply that. And she calls that 5G or 5D, five-dimensional learning. And she can start a degree course inside of 2 to 3 weeks, which is astonishing rate of data uptake and cognizance. So they're the kinds of things that have been unfolding since we were active many decades ago now, 2 or 3 decades ago. And so we've got a bit of catching up to do and bringing together the various elements that will constitute a repeatable, congruent delivery that we can provide to both young people and to adults, because we're living in times where jobs are disappearing. We're living in times where new jobs are appearing. This is an opportunity for unprecedented creativity. Yeah. And if an educational program that enables people to flesh out their various capabilities and aptitudes an order of magnitude higher than what's currently available, then we're really basically enabling the repurposing of humanity. And that's kind of the goal.
Let me ask the audience, and then we'll go and see if Lance has got any questions for you. But let me just ask the audience, if you guys would love to be learning at a lot faster rate than probably what many of us have learnt over the years. And so I know some people have struggled at school and learning, and some people have been really, school and learning was super easy for them. And if you guys would really love to have like the opportunity to like learn at this kind of a pace, then just drop your comments and show us your support for this in the chat there. Along the way, that'd be great. And remember, if you've got any questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll ask Dr. Blake as we continue this interview. So Lance, have you got any questions or comments you'd like to share with Dr. Blake?
Oh, absolutely. So Charles, this is well-established science.
Yes.
That's what I really want people to understand. And it's not that the academics don't know about it, but they restrict the access of this style of learning, don't they?
Well, we were certainly punished. Our students were blackballed. They were not permitted to enter the universities, and that means we were sent to the wall. The Barrister who funded this project was heartbroken by that. He felt so deeply betrayed because he thought, and quite rightly, that we were doing the right thing, and we definitely were. But yes, it's not popular. This is not something that most governments want to have their electorates to be powerful, have intellectual capacity, the ability to read through the massive amount of junk, the legislation each year. They make mountains. Like, I understand the Tax Act is several feet deep. Who the hell's going to be? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I do. So. I just want to sort of get an understanding that this is more about holding people back, the current education system, and making them fit into a certain box, isn't it? This is a servant masterclass. Exactly.
You're right on it, Lance. This is the system is not about empowerment. You see, there are 5 different primary modalities that we use to learn: visual, audio, gustatory, kinesthetic, etc. And the education system as it stands favours the visual, digitals, audio digitals. The people that most are the young guys, particularly, that are the kinesthetes. They're your people that learn from the real world, 3 dimensions, people that get their hands dirty in the field, carpenters, plumbers, sculptors, even I say dentists, because they're actually dealing with the 3 dimensions of the world. They're the ones that are most suffer at the hands of the education system, because they're confined, mostly told to shut up, not to move, and they're supposed to write and read, and they don't get to use their bodies, which is their primary means of accessing data from the cosmos, from the world around them. And they usually go away thinking rather poorly of themselves, that they're dumb. They've been persuaded that they're dumb. It's anything but true.
So is there fairly basic testing that can identify your potential strong areas for individuals?
Yes, in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, a series of questions, and whilst observing the movement of the eyes, will reveal very quickly what your primary and secondary modalities are. And that was part of how we used that technology for educating individuals. We were identifying their primary modalities, and then we were looking at their shortcomings and enabling strategies that they were able to put in place to cover the things that they found most difficult to do. And so they were making the best of their strengths and shoring up their abilities in their weakest areas.
Crazy, hey? This is crazy. So what do you think the true potential is of the human mind?
I don't think we can even define that. I think that we have been so persuaded as to our limitations as opposed to the extraordinary capacity. We are God's children, and God doesn't do shoddy work. And Sky's the limit to that, Lance. That's a question I couldn't even dare. But I can say this: if we were able to impart people with a combination of skills, such as I mentioned, using the transcranial stimulation, using remote viewing and mental telepathy, and learned cognizance strategies, it's breathless.
Yeah.
It has what potentials humanity is capable of.
So this reminds me of, sorry, you go, Ainsley.
No, I was just going to make a comment that we're only limited really by our own creativity and imagination, aren't we, by what we're capable of doing. And if we really apply ourselves, we can almost do pretty much or learn pretty much anything.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if you consider, if we were, for instance, to be able to congruently communicate with the other denizens of this planet, and many of them have much larger, more complex brains than we do, and I'm talking about the whales and the dolphins and so on and so forth. My goodness, it's breathtaking. You know, the latitude, because we have like 5 senses. We have eyes, ears, and the spectrum that we observe, the visible light spectrum, is so tiny in the whole broadness of the total spectrum, and the same goes for our audio capabilities. When you consider that whales, crocodiles, and hummingbirds, they all have extremely different areas of bandwidth, and so then consider the senses that other animals have that we don't have at all. Like, for instance, imagine a dog. A dog has acute gustatory and smell abilities. I mean, it fills their world. They love it. It provides them with so much information. But, you know, if we just took the time to consider that we are not confined to just those 5 or 6 senses. I do have an associate, a friend who's currently in Portugal, who is working with the 7 layers of the energetic field of the human body. And he says that he is up to something like 600 sensibilities that he's been able to determine that human beings are capable of perceiving. Well, that's 2 orders of magnitude more than what we currently consider to be the case. Well, that in itself is mind-blowing.
It is quite, and this is such an incredible subject. I said to Ainsley tonight, when I asked you, I said, look, we're just going to stick to education. And I don't think either of us has comprehended the depth that this conversation would take, but what an incredible journey. And the prospects for the future. It's so exciting. You know, we've got all these new children coming into the world. If we can give them a center where they can explore their boundaries, and you know, even for us oldies to explore those boundaries, I think this is part of the change that will come to humanity. But if you're talking about communicating with whales, they probably know the entire history of this planet.
It could be a very revealing conversation, enormously revealing. There's a lady called Anna Breitenbach from South Africa who engages in trans-species communication. And she's actually been inveigled to come to Byron Bay to have a conversation with the white sharks since they were turning a few people into a breakfast menu down there. They kind of wanted to know what's the new gig? Why are you eating so many of us surfies and the like? But she is the kind of person, and she teaches people this. She provides these training courses. One of which has been done by a friend of mine up at Rockhampton, and he works with horses and dogs and cats and cattle. And wow, a whole new dimension to our life. Bearing in mind also that people can similarly talk to trees and everything down to single cellular organisms. Well, you know, some of the trees on this planet are 13, 14, 15,000 years old and alive. So,
Mm.
and what they may be able to reveal, it really is quite an expansive and mind-blowing exercise. So when we did speak about, when you asked me if I would speak on education, I actually didn't have time to warn you. I should have warned.
It's got so many tentacles, hasn't it? So yeah. What was the name of that lady that you mentioned again? Anna who?
Anna Breitenbach, Breytenbach. And she made a beautiful movie called Diablo, about a black leopard that had been incarcerated in a European circus or something, and he just hated humanity, just was not interested. And he was shipped out to a big cat shelter in South Africa, and he didn't want to know about anybody. And that's the story of how it is that his name was changed from Diablo to Spirit, because he was so deeply misunderstood. This was a grand spirit of very formidable stature, and he was being treated like certainly well below the level of respect that he demanded. And when he got that, it completely changed his demeanor and his stature and his level of peace. I think it's about 11 or 13-minute video. It's certainly worth watching, but it's a brilliant introduction to the whole realm of trans-species communication, and you can see how elegantly and efficaciously Anna Breitenbach does work.
She actually was in a documentary in 2012, a 52-minute documentary filmed and produced by, I can't even pronounce this guy's name, he was probably a South African, Swati Thiagarajan, Craig Foster and Damon Foster, entitled The Animal Communicator. And it was nominated for the best long documentary and the best director back then. So at the 2012 Welt Mountain Documentary Festival. So I've just put the link, guys, in the chat there to Anna Breitenbach from Wikipedia. Well worth, lots of good links in there that you can go and have a bit more of a read about what she's doing there with the interspecies communication and stuff like that. So very, very interesting what you talk about. Some of the snippets that you have talked about, like the VAK and the learning, NLP, very blessed to have done a lot of that in the last decade myself with all the personal development training that I've done. So I sort of get where you're going with that. And that was fascinating in itself, learning all of that back then. Probably don't use it as much as what I should, but now that you've sort of spoken about it and go back and visit that and then apply that a lot more. Some of us tend to learn and then forget to apply.
Yes, well, it's a very powerful tool. It can be equally used for good as for evil.
Yeah.
And there are some people that use NLP for nefarious purposes. So these tools are very important. And I guess when we empower humanity, when we empower people, we need to make sure that they're being informed by Great Spirit in their, rather than to use these very powerful tools for darker purposes, shall we say, manipulation and extraction and so on and so forth. So, but look, a lot of these skills are well mastered. The CIA has done some amazing work on the mind. MK Ultra is one of their programs. I think Monarch is another one. There's some pretty amazing stuff that they've done that's not necessarily used for the right purposes. But if some of that information and those technologies were able to be applied to the process of education and learning to learn, then they could be immensely powerful and of huge benefit. And it's so sad, really, that so much of that technology has been won at considerable cost and then used for less than honourable purposes.
Evil.
Yeah.
One of the other questions we've got from one of our listeners, Dr. Blake, is can we learn to photo read as an adult?
Yes, you can. Absolutely. There is a procedure, a protocol. There's a course that's held by a gentleman called Shannon Panzo.
Sorry, Shannon, who? You dropped out there.
Shannon Panzo, Panzo.
All right, yep,
Shannon. So I think he still does the course.
yeah.
If memory serves me, he's in
Yep. Mental
he's in
photography,
Victoria.
photographic memory. Yep.
Yeah.
ShannonPanzo.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Well worth doing. But look, you know, he does these weekend courses. You don't acquire these skills in the course of a weekend. Let me assure you of that.
Yeah.
What you need to do is you go to those courses to learn the disciplines and protocols that then you need to practice to establish those capabilities. And that's not always easy because, you know, we fork out $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 and do these courses. And then we come back and oh, that was fabulous. And then life happens and the wheels fall off. And yeah, what you're left with is a piece of paper you can put on the wall that, yeah, I attended this course. Well, bully for you.
Yeah.
The problem, you don't do the work, you don't get the results. And
100%.
and this is
yeah.
this is why I think that having a school where you have full immersion for at least 6, it takes a while to reestablish habits of mind and patterns of behavior. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, you know, a flash in the pan, got the T-shirt, I'm good.
Yeah.
That's not quite.
They generally say, I think it takes 10,000 hours to master a craft. And so if you're going to do this education, and then it's always good to have like follow-ups where you can then put into practice and implement and like you said, do that continually over a period of time. So then it does become a habit that you then naturally just have in your everyday life, but you've then had that support ongoing. You've not just gone to a 3-day weekend, spent $3,000 and then gone, yeah, that was great. And then you do nothing, like you said. If you have that ongoing support, then you're more inclined to go, well, this is great. I've got a really support network around me that can help me learn and move forward.
Because really what learning is about is establishing neural pathways.
Yeah.
And the more repetition that you can engage with, the more well-established those pathways can be. And so this is why it's so precious for young people. You know, we lock our kids up for 12 years and they come out of school, they haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, they don't have a clue, right? And that's a waste of 12 years. Now, consider the possibilities. If during the course of that time, we were teaching about the discourse of laying down neural pathways and establishing capabilities such as we speak. Now, consider how they might emerge after 12 years of education.
Young entrepreneurs. Yeah, young entrepreneurs. I remember one of the worst experiences that I had in my final years. I was quite I wouldn't say a top A grade student, but certainly a high achiever in my going through my school. But I don't know, maybe the wheels fell off by the time I got to the final 2 years, and I was more like the organizer type and things like that. And I was really good at learning stuff and doing the assignments, but put under pressure in an exam situation was something that I was never really good at. And I remember one of the young guys now, I did like the highest 2 levels of maths in my school, and we kind of gave up, I suppose. After about an hour, and we were sort of joking about it. I remember this teacher had said to us, what are you two doing out after such an hour? And we're like, oh, we're allowed out. And his attitude was, well, as far as I'm concerned, if you can't sit a 3-hour exam, you shouldn't even be at school. And that was like a memory that literally has stayed with me. And I mean, it's been a long time since I've left high school, but this is the memory that I got left with. And I'm sure if I went and revisited all the students that I went to school with way back then, I mean, I've been in business myself nearly 20 years now. So I can't say too many people who could say that they've been in business that long. So, you know, I've obviously done something right along the way.
Well, you know, on that very matter, a friend of mine has created a device called a focus band. Okay. And the focus band fits around your cranium. It's now embedded into a hat, so you don't necessarily need to look like a dork walking around with, you know,
Wonder Woman.
Yeah, exactly. But this focus band interfaces with your telephone and enables you to balance and optimize your brain state. And he and his father did this work. His name's Henry Bolton, very clever young man. And they started in the realms of golf because, there's money in golf and sports. And there was a particular golfer, and I don't know his name, but he was very tall and able to hit a ball from here to Africa. And but in the competitions, he just used to get nervous and he was unable to perform. So they said, "Can we work with you?" And he said, "Yes, because I need to do something. I'm not able to achieve the results in competition that I want to and have to achieve." And apparently, he won some major golfing tournament in America 3 times in a row.
Oh, wow.
And that came back to learning how to maintain his flow state.
Yeah.
So when you were doing examinations and you were being put under pressure, what was happening to you was your flow state was being disrupted. And what Henry's technology enables you to do is to teach yourself to stay in flow state even under extraordinary circumstances. That's a really, really precious gift.
Yeah.
That's just the beginning of it, right? So he's an Australian here, lives in Brisbane, and he's trying to raise capital for his project and to get this up and running because, every kid in school needs to have one of these things.
Yeah. How many of our listeners would love a flow, to be in flow? How many of our listeners, just drop it in the chat, let us know if you would be interested in something as exciting as this, because I know I certainly would be.
Well, it doesn't matter whether you're doing exams or learning to surf and surfing.
Yeah.
Like if you're in a surfing competition, you want to be in peak state. And that's what his technology enables you to do. It's brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
So, Charles, let's talk about a school.
Yeah.
Is there an optimal age for children to start this learning journey? Is it something that could be encouraged at home first and then, go off to school?
I think that the young kids have the least impediment to learning.
Yeah.
I know there is a lady here, I think she's on the Sunshine Coast, and she teaches young kids how to perceive colours with their hands, how to read without actually seeing. In other words, people can be writing a card, but they know exactly what's on the card.
I've seen that.
This is repeatable stuff, right?
Yeah.
This young people, you see, as we get older, we become less and less flexible. We get more imbued with thoughts of our limitations, and then we go through awful periods in the process of growing up through puberty, and it becomes more important for us to conform to everybody else's standards of stuff instead of excelling in your uniqueness. Conformity is overrated. It seriously is. But for young people going through a particular age group, conformity is very important to them. So there are things that there are optimal times. There are optimal times for kids to learn, and obviously the younger the better in many respects.
The early childhood learning.
They could be learning this stuff. It's amazing. Once you imbue that gift to someone, it's kind of difficult to take it away from them. But the longer you leave it, the more difficult it is to attain those extraordinary gifts.
So if we train the generations that are coming through now being born, they can train their children with these gifts. They can be trained to identify their children's gifts and to encourage that.
Yes, absolutely. And look, Lance, the reality is that the technology exists for almost mind-to-mind communication, mind-to-mind transfer of information and knowledge. But that is used by the big end of town for their own purposes. It's not made available for the purposes of education per se. So really, it's kind of for our generation. I speak for myself here because mine was the year that I was at art school when Gough Whitlam came in and registered this spurious entity called the Australian Government on the New York Securities Exchange. That was 1993. And I had watched the dismemberment of our system of government, all the checks and balances going out the back door, instead of being, a parliamentary democracy operating with the separation of powers. As soon as it became a corporation, it had a CEO, and all of those powers went out the back door, and they've been there ever since. And we've seen the consequences, and we see it even today, probably more terrifyingly than ever. There's a lot of work to do for our young people to recover the level of betrayal that humanity has suffered. And we need to be bright, strong, clever, compassionate, and loving in our reclamation of our position as stewards of the planet rather than the rapists that we've become.
Yeah.
We also need to be responsible for our own actions, though, too, because I'll point this out. I don't know who knows this, but Daniel Andrews is the Premier of Victoria. Now, Daniel Andrews went through school, went through university, become a staffer for the ALP, become a member of Parliament, become a Premier. He's never had a proper job. If people stopped for 2 minutes and considered that, no one would vote for him at all, because he's got no skill set, none. But there he is as Premier, and the indictment is actually on us that we failed to take knowledge. And that's where we continuously let ourselves down. Now, I know it's been a masquerade. This is the Wizard of Oz story, man behind the curtain. But sooner or later, we have to say that, well, that's not an acceptable excuse. This information's here. We need to use it. And that's when the change happens, when we take control of our own lives.
Dr. Blake, I want to ask you, in relation to the last couple of speakers that we've had on, obviously have been around education and what's happening in the schools and the libraries and the books and the information that are actually now being put in front of our children at a faster rate, which many of us would believe as to be deemed inappropriate material for the children. Pornography, and I guess is what we're saying. The things that they want to teach primary school, pre-primary school kids, queer story hours, all these sorts of things is what they want to teach our children now, which has been way more prevalent than it ever has in years gone by. How detrimental, from a learning perspective, obviously you've been an educator, how detrimental is this really to the minds of these children growing up, be it pre-primary or teenage years?
You're asking myself?
Yeah, your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, look, all of these programs are basically what the Marxists put together to destroy the Western world. And right there, that should answer the question. These are basically all part of a plan to derail our cultural integrity. And look, that's without discussing the various topics of, sexuality, blah, blah. But I'm pretty convinced that, 8-year-olds do not need a discourse on anal sex at this point, right? Seriously, we do not need that. No. Thank you. But no, thank you. A serious no, thank you. If you want to talk about that later, blah, blah. That is completely ancillary in my view. That the thing is that we've got to take cognizance of the fact that a very definite, controlled, highly intelligent, very well measured and implemented program of cultural destruction has been unfolded upon us through unionism and through communism and through Marxism, and primarily through our education system, particularly our universities. And people come out of universities card-carrying Marxists, and they don't even know that they are, because the message has been sold to them in such subtle ways. And they come out loathing their culture, loathing the fact that they're white, loathing this, that, and the other. Such a lot of nonsense. But it's a deliberate thing. Was set in motion by, I think it was the Russians, and they've long since forgotten about it. But it's like a great big momentum filled wheel. It just has kept on crashing through the Western civilization, producing all manner of destructive. God, look at America and look at the United Kingdom. It's heartbreaking what's happened to the Western world. There's no accident. It's all part of a program for our culture and to destroy our congruity as a people. And I pray that people wake up in time and that we can turn this around. I guess there's another perspective on all of this too, and that is that if so much evil had not been perpetrated against us, the likelihood that the Western world, indeed humanity, would take the opportunity to wake up would be very low. The gift they give us is the opportunity to wake the hell up and to get on, do something really sensible and congruent and powerful for our own defense. Yeah.
And if we could get more of your schools up and running around this nation and our children out of the mainstream schools and into these higher learning, these fast learning schools where they're going to be learning so much more, deeper, faster, be more grounded, how much more balanced would the children of today be going into the next generation if we had those types of schools rather than what they're attempting to implement now?
Well, absolutely. But it's all consistent with our vision of creating sovereign communities that are, when I say sovereign, are capable of meeting all of their requirements such that they are in a material sense and spiritual sense actually sovereign, because they create all of the energy, fuel, food, commodities, everything that they want and need. They do so on the basis of cottage industry, but with a difference. We've had 150 years of industrial revolution. We've had the advent of 3D printing. 3D printing flips on its head the whole manufacturing process. So if you combine that with high efficacy technology for refining elements, and you interface that with 3D printing, there's really not much that you can't print out and make as a community. Can you imagine a community that had all of these abilities to manufacture, and what an extremely exciting playground that would be for the kids coming up through that, such that they could actually play a hand in their own culture of creating new wondrous commodities and tools and electronics and so on and so forth. It's a fabulous concept, and if enough of these communities could come together and they became sovereign, they could become an international federation of sovereign communities, that in the fullness of time, my prayer would eclipse the United Nations and all of that nonsense and replace it with good people connected to source, who love the planet, love themselves, and love nature, and are playing a congruent and beautiful role instead of the despised, hateful view of what the New World Order wants to perpetrate against humanity. So we have to replace their program with a vastly more compelling and more intelligent and more efficacious program than they're offering. And I don't think we have to work too hard to do that, considering how diabolical what they're serving up to us. Yeah. You will nothing and be happy. Well, I don't think so, mate. I think we'll own everything and we'll be happy. Yeah. And consider what you might have to say after the fact.
I think we'll redefine happiness. But I'd like to say and ask you this, Charles, without you going into the projects you're working on, we're in a good position when it comes to technology, aren't we?
We are indeed. We are indeed. There are technologies that we've been working on for decades and decades, and I have a network, as was pointed out, that spans the planet, and I've watched a lot of good people taken out as well for the good doing, because they know that when energy becomes ubiquitous, that then their pincer movement, being the right to issue capital and the control of energy, is a goner. They will no longer slave humanity.
Lots of exciting topics and conversations, but we are out of time, gentlemen. It has been an absolute pleasure. Like, we could just keep talking and talking. There's so many tentacles to this this conversation, and so we'll hopefully have to have you on again at another time, Dr. Blake, if you'll come back and grace us with your presence. But ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed tonight's conversations, then please, we will get the replay up so that you can share it. Lance, thank you for being here with me. We're sorry we lost Kent along the way. He had some internet issues and was unable to join us and get back on. But Dr. Blake, thank you so much for joining us and for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody,
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you next time on Triple Tap. Bye for now.
See you guys.
Cheers.